Hello. Is there anybody out there? Any Pink Floyd fans out there? Yeah. Well, welcome to Speech Night. Several minutes ago, I lost my voice, which, when you're in my profession, is never a good thing. But mercifully, Jennifer was able to let me rifle through her purse and eat all of her chocolate, and I feel much better now. I assure you it was not a ruse. It was definitely gone. Welcome to Speech Night. This is a showcase of the Santa Rosa Junior College speech and debate team, as well as an outstanding student who will be giving us a persuasive speech tonight from one of Susan Houlihan's Communication 1 classes. So this is a particularly special night for me. I've actually done 24 of these speech nights over the last 12 years, which, if you're in my class and you know my grade calculation system, you could have literally skipped every assignment, gone to those speech nights, and you still pass the class. Why do you think we're here? I know that's why you're here. And by the way, I know who you are. You're not passing. No, you all passing. I got some friends in the military that have hooked me up with some infrared stuff so I can see at night. Before I start the show, because this is particularly a special night to me, as this being my last speech night, I wanted to reflect on kind of what I've seen over the past 12 years coaching speech and debate at Santa Rosa. And I think the most logical place to start is where I got my first chance, which is Mark Nelson. And if you would please stand, Mark. Mark. In September of 2007, I marched into his office and said, "Hey, I want to coach debate with you." And he kind of looked at me like, what? Because he'd been doing such a splendid job. But he mercifully said, "Sure." And that was the beginning of a beautiful relationship. Mark taught me a lot about speech and debate. He taught me a lot about being an effective communications instructor. And over those years, I've had a chance to add to the wisdom that Mark provided with Susan Houlihan. Would you please stand up, Susan? Susan and Mark are each former directors of forensics and very, very accomplished in their own rights. And I, very much like a sponge, tried to pay attention to what they did and mix and match and create what I interpreted as the best way to move forward in forensics based on their guidance. And I assure you, I couldn't have been in better hands. They've been amazing. The three things I want to share with you that I learned from forensics and that I witnessed in forensics are as follows. The first thing that I was able to see over the past 12 years is a pattern of excellence. Last year, as some of you may know, Santa Rosa Junior College became the first two-year college in the nation to win the entire National Parliamentary Debate Association season sweepstakes, beating out 2- and 4-year colleges alike. I'd say that warrants a round of applause. I've been blessed to see state champions, national champions, individual national, individual state, and team champions all the way around. I've been gratified to see our students go on to get scholarships at 4-year colleges, where they also became national champions. And it's pretty amazing to see the amazing array of mental capacity that has flowed through this school. The second thing I've seen is consistency. Santa Rosa Junior College this year became only the 6th college or university in the nation to remain in the top 24 schools of all colleges and universities across the nation for 12 consecutive years. They keep on bringing it. Round of applause for your students. To put that in perspective, NC2AA football, there are 12 schools in the history of the NC2A that have, for 12 seasons or more, been able to make the top 24. So they're in pretty elite company. The last thing, and frankly the most important, that I've witnessed is student evolution. Because the true secret and the true value in any program doesn't merely lie in the trophies and the awards, which are nice to help people think that the program is valuable, but the true meaning of the program is optimizing student educational opportunity, to empower them to communicate clearly and effectively so that their voice and their thought is heard. And I can assure you, as somebody that is likely older than anyone else in this room, you live in a time where it is more vital than ever that you are able to discern fact from fiction, and that you are able to communicate effectively to those around you your desires and your preference. I don't want my students to be walked over because their voice isn't heard. I don't want my students walked over because their voice is not organized and is powerful. Student empowerment is the key. That is the only reason that we are here at college, whether you are in an art department, a science, or anything else, it's to learn how to learn. And I have been blessed for 12 years to learn from some of the best, my students, Mark's and Susan's and my students, our students at Santa Rosa Junior College on the speech and debate team. And the last thing I want to say before I turn it over to our MCs is I would like everybody to please give a round of applause to all of the faculty and all of the students that have participated in Santa Rosa Junior College forensics dating back to the 1920s. Round of applause for all your forensics champions. All right. Well, I'm now going to turn it over to the people that you really came here to see. And I must tell you that this, of all the speech nights I've been involved in, definitely has a somewhat tongue-in-cheek, whimsical flair. Please do not take everything, especially with the debaters, that comes out of their mouths as gospel. They are purposely trying to have fun tonight and to play a little bit. I assure you they didn't win championships necessarily with this sense of humor, but it'll be more entertaining if we sort of play along. So I would now like to turn over the show to your esteemed MCs, Lindsay and Nicholas. Clap for Lindsay and Nicholas.
First time on one of these. So, start off, thank you, Hal, for introducing us, and hello, my name is Nicholas Santos. I'm the hypersocial, wildly unorthodox, somewhat eccentric member of the forensics team. I'm a master at procrastinating, but for the record, I totally didn't wait till the last minute for anything in this class. Hey, Hal.
And my name is Lindsay Liepman.
Is that all you're gonna say? Are you really gonna do me like that? Well, is that it? You want to say anything else?
No, I'm good.
I primarily compete in parliamentary debate. I won bronze at the California State Championship, with some time spent competing in IPDA as well. These events will be described later on. Additionally, I was lucky enough to compete at nationals my first semester here on the team.
Lucky, huh? Not lucky to place at nationals.
You know what, Lindsay? I'll have you know, I placed highly in all of their hearts. They'll remember me.
Yeah, okay. I also primarily compete in parliamentary debate, winning silver and bronze medals at several major tournaments with my partner, Edward Nugent. I also competed briefly in IPDA debate and won a bronze medal at the national competition.
IPDA is just baby parley.
As you can see, Nicholas and I have always had a charming back and forth.
We both appreciate and can't stand each other at the same time.
One time we were paired up for a debate, and we swore afterwards that we would never be partners again.
And yet here we are. Okay, on a serious note,
La.
what are you doing?
It's my serious note.
On a serious note, we appreciate everyone coming out here tonight.
We would like to send a special thank you to our wonderful coaches, Hal Sanford, Mark Nelson, and Susan Houlihan, for their hard work and dedication to forensics this semester.
If any of this interests you tonight, please come down at the end and talk to one of us.
Before we begin, we would like everyone to please silence their cell phones and other devices. Go ahead.
Otherwise, we will confiscate them and use them for our budget.
Yes. Okay. To start off, our first event of the night is a parliamentary debate round. In parliamentary debate, a statement is read, teams of two are assigned sides, and the teams have 20 minutes to research their side of the debate. The affirmative team will agree with the statement and argue for it, and the negation team will disagree with the statement and argue against it. Whichever side does the better job at destroying the opponent with facts and logic will win the round.
All right, Ben Shapiro. Tonight, we have some amazing individuals to showcase this event. So here are our debaters. As they set up the table and stuff, we'll talk about them.
Yay. Okay, I'm gonna wait till Ava steps up to introduce Ava.
We can just continue.
Okay. First, we have Ava Persinger walking right there, who spends most of their time playing Minecraft and Fortnite dancing in public.
They don't stop even if you ask very nicely. And they also enjoy making their partner, Nick Riley, have just the most wonderful time here on the team.
Nick Riley often spends his time being Ava's personal punching bag.
I'm also 99% sure that he has a closet shrine dedicated to someone like St. Thomas Aquinas.
Next, we have Kyle Lowry, who is the single most talented individual at disagreeing with literally everyone around him, even out of everyone I have ever met at intercollegiate forensics.
Okay, I'm 100% sure that he has a closet shrine dedicated to Nick Riley.
That's supposed to be a secret.
Finally, we have Kirsten Lofgren, who is a ray of sunshine that is well needed on our team.
And she only stays this way by blocking out virtually every conversation we have on the debate team.
Now, in all seriousness, these are some very talented individuals.
Representing the affirmation, we have Nick and Ava, who have had a long history of competitive success, most recently at both the state and national competitions, taking home bronze in both competitions.
And representing the negation tonight, we have Kyle and Kirsten, who have had a very strong season this semester, winning gold at the California State Championship.
Tonight's debate topic will be, the US federal government should establish a space force.
So what do you think about that, Nicholas?
Have you seen like sci-fi anything? We need a space force to protect from the alien menace.
Sci-fi anything. Does WALL-E count?
Does WALL-E count as sci-fi? Well, wait, I can work with this. You know what? Remember to recycle, everyone, because otherwise we'll end up like WALL-E. So, without further ado, let's begin the debate.
So there's a little confusion there. I'm actually Kyle. I'm on the affirmative with Kirsten. So just to get that out of the way. Thank you everybody for being here tonight. Just so you know that we know you're here we want you here for two reasons. The first one is because we want your sweet, sweet dollars. And the other reason is because we want to show off our skills, so hopefully you come and join our group. And although, as previously mentioned, in a kind of hurtful way, we know you're mostly here for extra credit. If you're in that second group, we want you to know that you do not have to do this particular setting when you first start out. When you come to our community, debaters are very polite, and when you start debating or doing individual events, you're going to be in front of a small group of people that are very encouraging. So just to get that out of the way, if you're interested. So the resolution today is the United States federal government should establish a space force. Now, a space force is a separate branch of the military which exists in space. You would think we have the Army, we have the Navy, we have the Air Force, we need a space force. So my first argument for why we need a Space Force is national security. So right now we are in the middle of a great power struggle. Currently we are standing off in conflict with both China and Russia. Both of these powers are notorious human rights violators. China has a habit of imprisoning and potentially torturing political dissidents, and Russia has a bad habit of, killing people when they disagree with Vladimir Putin. So, additionally, we know that Russia has been meddling in our elections, and none of this is good. In addition to all of these facts, we are currently in the middle of essentially an arms race. Right now, Russia and China are actively moving to develop space and military technology. In China's case, specifically as far back as 2007, they had developed missiles which specifically target satellites. This is really bad when you consider how much of our world is ran by satellites, the cell phone in your pocket. If the Chinese decided to attack our satellites, we would be crippled immediately. So, right now, we are not investing enough money into our space development programs. We have a very small investment in it, but we are being outstripped militarily. And if we do not take action now, we're looking at losing an arms race to two powers which are juxtaposed against us and with bad histories of treatment towards their own citizens. Now, my second argumentation for why we need to have a Space Force, I would title this Star Trek. So if we don't have that many nerds out here in the audience, a little background tech. Star Trek is it's like a military force in space, kind of like a space force. And in it, you have people of different sexual orientations, different races, different species, and everybody lives in harmony and cooperation. And more importantly, this happened as far back as the 60s. Now, the only problem was it's not real, but it can be. So right now, we are facing down serious climate change catastrophe in the world today. The International Panel of Climate Change has stated that if we don't meet certain carbon emission requirements, reductions, within the next 12 years, that we will be facing such bad fallout that we could be experiencing an extinction level event. And additionally, we are completely on track to entirely miss this deadline. So, assuming that we do that, if we want to continue the existence of both humans and other species, we need to start terraforming. Terraforming is where you take other planets or large moons and you make them habitable to human beings. Now, in Star Trek, these are called Class M2 planets, which can be lived on by humans. It's a good metaphor. Assuming that somehow we figure things out and we do not die from climate change, we still face difficulties as a species, specifically with overpopulation and with food shortages as the population continues to grow. If we start terraforming, this will allow us both to give people a place to go to, so they don't have to live in little egg-sized huts like in Japan, and also to allow us to grow food so that people don't starve to death, because that's sad. Additionally, there's a question that's going to come up, which is like, okay, so we have Star Trek, but why does it have to be a military force? Isn't the military kind of bad, and that they just mostly kill people? Space pirates, okay? It's a thing. Historically, when the Spanish invaded South America and they started taking all the silver from Spain, well, there's some groups of people decided, we want to get some of that sweet Spanish silver. So that's a threat. Additionally, we don't know what else is out there in space. There could be all sorts of alien threats, such as Romulans, Klingons, Kardashians. And for all of these reasons, it is absolutely necessary that we establish a Space Force. Thank you.
Alrighty, is this thing on?
Sorry, I forgot he has to ask me questions now.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask you some questions really quick. So first question, how are you doing today?
It's a really exciting day for me, thank you.
I bet it is. So I'm gonna pick on you just a little bit because I've got about a minute to do so. So my first actual question, Kyle, You're talking about other nations. You specifically talked about Russia and China developing space technology. My question to you is, do you know why it is that these countries are behaving aggressively?
They want power.
Do you think that that's their sole motive?
Why else do you develop weapons?
All right, moving on. With regards to your plan, can we trust the United States government?
The United States government is still better than the Chinese or Russian government.
That sounds like a pretty reluctant yes.
It's a severely reluctant yes.
Sounds good. What would prevent, in your opinion, I guess, what would prevent the United States federal government from using this space military that you're advocating for, I guess, evil reasons?
Democracy isn't terrible.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Democracy?
Okay, so democracy is going to stop them the same way democracy has stopped them from doing so in this planet.
Yeah, double down on that one.
Yeah. You know, that sounds good to me. I think I'm going to destroy you now. Alrighty, can everyone hear me okay? Awesome. Opponents good? Awesome. Hello everyone, my name is Nick, and I am the first speaker representing the negation. So tonight my partner and I will be arguing that the United States federal government should not establish a space force. And we're going to be doing this by presenting two main arguments, followed by a refutation of the arguments that Kyle has just made, and I'm kind of itching to get at those, so I'm going to hurry this up. This brings me to my first argument. Luckily for me, my opponent was actually kind enough to make my first argument for me. Kyle talked about the fact that other nations are currently engaged in building up their space technologies. This is actually completely correct. Kyle is 100% right about this. And since Kyle is a nice guy, he's one of my best buds, I'm actually going to do him the courtesy of only talking about Russia and China because that's actually what he laid out. So I think that'll make things nice for him. That being said, let's move on to our first argument, which is international backlash. As Kyle mentioned, Russia and China are both developing militarized space technologies. And within the past 5 years, China has actually created a satellite called the Roaming Dragon, which has a robotic arm attachment that allows it to take down other satellites that it comes into contact with. Within that exact same time span, it's worth noting that Russia has acquired anti-satellite missiles. They're used exclusively for the purpose of taking out satellites, rather than being multi-purpose. Now, the affirmative team, as I mentioned, is completely correct in pointing out that other nations are acquiring these technologies, but where they've fallen short is taking into account the motive behind their actions. That's actually why I asked Kyle if he knew why that was. And we, as the negation, would suggest that these nations are only developing this technology because they feel threatened by the United States. The United States is the most robust military power that the world has ever seen. Other nations feel threatened by the fact that the US routinely forces its will upon less powerful nations or their spheres of influence. And as such, they've taken refuge in the one domain that we have not already armed to the teeth. I'll give you one guess what that is: space. I would like to point out that at no point has any other nation, including Russia or China, ever used this technology against us because we have not pushed them hard enough to do so. These nations feel incredibly threatened by the United States and what it is that we're doing on this planet. So can you imagine if we take their last semblance of security away from them by literally making a space military, sending men with guns into space to combat their satellites? These are actions that would necessarily lead to an increase in hostility and to the point of direct conflict. Now, the plan that the affirmative team has put forward would do the exact opposite of what it is that they've claimed. Rather than make Americans safer, they would put not only our own country, but the entire world at risk due to the risk of military conflict with world powers. So with this established, I'd like to move on to our second argument. Now, the second argument is kind of boring. I'm not going to lie to you. It's not nearly as exciting about the possibility of fighting a space war with Russia and China, but it's important nonetheless. This argument is just about waste. Now, in September of last year, the Secretary of the Air Force, Heather Wilson, estimated that the establishment of a space force would cost about $13 billion. That's just to make it exist, basically. That's not operating cost. Now, additionally, a branch of this unique nature would necessarily require that tremendous amounts of natural resources are being consumed, and we can take a lesson from the United States Navy, given that it is actually one of the single largest polluters in the entire world, even compared to other nations. Now, please don't misunderstand anything that I'm saying. I absolutely adore the fact that the United States has the world's best Navy, like by far. It's like, if you've seen the Russian Navy, it's hilarious. But imagine taking the harm that the Navy does to our oceans and now moving that same harm into our immediate atmosphere and planetary orbit with the pollution that a Space Force is going to generate. The affirmative team's plan would ensure tremendous waste both in dollars as well as natural resources, and when these things can best be used here on Earth for things like combating climate change and developing renewable resources and alternative energies, I think it makes the most sense to do that. So now I'll move on to addressing the arguments that my opponent has just made before me. My opponent's first argument, I think you called it national security. I'll try to stay on that topic. My opponent's first argument is entirely predicated on the notion that establishing a space force is the only thing that can protect the United States from this space technology actually being used against us. And as I pointed out with our first argument, pursuing such an action would be the surest way to provoke the very situation that they seek to prevent. In the event that the United States acts unilaterally by creating a space military like my opponent just advocated for, we would basically just be pushing our adversaries to a state of vulnerability that they feel pressured and have to resort to desperate measures. Think of it like this. So let me think of a good analogy real quick. Imagine that your neighbor buys a car with a very loud exhaust and paints flames on the side. You don't have one of these, and it makes you feel really bad. So you decide to buy a gun, go outside, and point it at your neighbor in his car. This is essentially what our opponents are advocating for with their plan, but the car is a satellite and your neighbor is China. Now, this is not a reasonable response. I'm sure you can all agree with me. So with their first argument in the trash, we can move on to their second argument about Star Trek. Now, their argument would lead you to believe that if the United States creates a space force, we are going to essentially become the Federation from Star Trek, a show which I have never watched. I fail to understand how the affirmative team manages to perform the mental gymnastics, because that's basically what it is, jumping from we need to create a military in space to fight Russia and China, and then in the next breath say, oh, actually we need the space military to be able to pursue diplomacy and scientific research in space. And how do they insist that these are both consequences of the exact same plan? There's no reason to believe that a space force is going to be what brings us these things. If you want to pursue science and diplomacy, you send scientists and diplomats. You do not send the United States military. Now, believe me, the military is amazing at their job. They're really, really unbelievably good at it. And what they do is fighting. So, I could talk to you for days on end about how awesome the US military is, but in the instance of conflict with other nations, like regarding diplomacy and space satellites, I think it's best that we avoid using the military. So I put forth to you that if the United States were to assume the role of any organization from a sci-fi series, because I guess that's what we're talking about today for some reason, I would suggest that we would actually be the Galactic Empire from Star Wars. We would be a bureaucratic, authoritarian nightmare state rather than the Federation from Star Trek. The United States federal government does not have a proven track record of being honest on the international stage, but it has one of the most impressive resumes you have ever seen when it comes to bullying other nations into doing what we want them to do. We have no reason to believe that if we give the government a space force, that they're going to become this peace-loving actor that wants to engage and talk to aliens and learn about their culture that my opponent seems to suggest that they would. So there's a lot better reason to believe that they would use this power to control, to abuse, and to dominate anyone that stood in their way. And as much as I love Star Wars, I would do my best to avoid the rise of a government with a Death Star and an Imperial fleet in its control. So thank you. I am open for questioning.
Yeah, you need to stay neutral out there. We don't appreciate it, guys. All right. So, Nick, I got a couple questions for you.
Hit me.
Maybe later. Let's see how this goes. So, Nick, we were in an arms race before, correct?
Are you referring to the Cold War?
That's correct.
Yeah, we were for a long time.
Did that end with violence?
Yeah, absolutely you did. In proxy wars in Nicaragua, in Cuba, in Laos,
you, Nick.
in
That's enough.
Cambodia. Okay.
Did that end in out-and-out war?
Between the USSR and the US?
Correct.
No, it did not. Thank God.
Interesting. No world-ending war between an arms race. So you mentioned that we spend a lot of money on our military right now.
A ton.
What does the military do?
Fights people that
Why?
need to be fought
Why do they fight people, Nick?
because some people are really mean and need to be shot.
Would you say that?
I'm sorry, it's just true. Some people do. Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah.
So they defend our freedom, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And do you think it's worth spending money to defend our freedom?
100%, all $716 billion of it.
That's all I need. Thank you so
Awesome.
much. I'm glad you. Wait, no, I didn't mean question-wise. I still got more for you.
Keep going.
You thought he was getting out of here easy. So you're suggesting that we need scientists and diplomats, not military personnel.
We need both, just it would be better not to use the military in this specific instance.
So could we have scientists and diplomats without military personnel?
Yeah, of course.
And we wouldn't just be bowled around by other countries?
Yeah, probably.
So if we want the diplomats and the scientists to work, we got to protect them, yes?
If we want them to be safe and not end up like a certain individual from Saudi Arabia in a Turkish
Got
embassy
it.
in Istanbul,
Got it.
yeah.
Yeah, got it. Military, good. Let me ask you one last question. So, Star Wars,
Yep,
the Empire.
yep.
This is it's an organization ran by what we could essentially call a space wizard, correct?
Yeah.
Do you know any space wizards?
In the United States,
Anywhere.
Bernie Sanders is running. That's the only one that comes to mind. I think you're out of time.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to another speech night. My name is Kirsten, and I'm going to be arguing in favor of a space force. So it seems like both teams agree that several hostile countries are developing space weapons called anti-satellite missiles that are capable of destroying U.S. satellites. Both teams disagree, however, on the solution. So I'll be talking about what Nick said. Nick believes that the international community will feel threatened at the creation of a U.S. Space Force and prompt them to attack. However, there is about 0% chance of this happening, maybe even less. Why? Because the United States already has the biggest military. We have the biggest Army, Navy, and Air Force. There is no strategic reason for them to attack the United States now. So why would that change if we just add more to our military? Stronger military, less reasons to attack us. Also, historically, this has been the case. Back in the Cold War area, the Soviet Union and the United States developed nuclear weapons at roughly the same time. And guess what? We haven't died of nuclear war yet. So why would Russia, China, and others spend billions of dollars and countless hours developing weapons that they had no plan to use? They do it because they know that space is the United States' biggest weakness right now, and they know they can get a leg up on us if they develop this technology. At some point, they're going to be putting their militaries into space. It's inevitable, and we want the United States to be able to defend ourselves. Nobody wants Vladimir Putin to have the upper hand on us, do you? No. Right. So, we know that our satellites are essentially sitting ducks right now, floating around in space defenseless, and we know that destructive weapons exist from countries that are likely to use them.
And since critical aspects of our military and economy depend on functioning satellites, it would be foolish to not establish a new military branch focused on defending our technology in space. It would be like sitting on a railroad track and just watching the train approach, about to hit you. Or it would be like watching your neighbor polishing an AK-47 in their yard while looking at your property. Not a good idea, guys. It's equally foolish to whine about the cost. First of all, $13 billion is a drop in the bucket compared to the over $700 billion budget we already have. And loss of satellite capabilities have devastating consequences. So trust me, the cost is worth it. Our military communications and navigations rely on the global scale coordination that satellites provide. A lack of functioning satellites would take our military back to the pre-digital age, leaving drones, missiles, and ground units vulnerable, ready to attack by hostile governments like Vladimir Putin's. We don't want that to happen. Putin would not make a good president of the United States. So, the economy would also be devastated as bank accounts would freeze up and some businesses would lose access to electricity, could even lead to a financial crash. In addition, airplanes wouldn't be able to fly, climate scientists wouldn't be able to monitor carbon dioxide levels in our atmosphere and predict storms. So with all these major consequences at the loss of our functioning satellites, the cost is definitely worth it. But the most important consequence of all of them is we would lose internet access. That means no more memes. Now, let's talk about Star Trek. So, if our Star Trek utopian vision of the future, which would be us exploring and inhabiting the galaxy, if that is to be realized, we need a space force. Our planet is dying of global warming, and terraforming Mars, like making Mars's atmosphere breathable for humans, could be our only hope for the survival of the species. Luckily, Martians do not exist, because that would be colonialism, but other aliens might have their eyes on our solar system, and it might be smart to have weapons to defend ourselves. As we explore the universe's wonders, we will need our military power for basic security. We can't just leave NASA's astronauts and our expensive spaceships vulnerable to evil aliens like Daleks. Right? And at least having a big military would make these aliens think twice before attacking the United States. So for these two reasons, we really need a Space Force, and we need one now. Thank you.
What a sap, guys. Am I right? Am I right?
Hi, my name is Ava, and today, me and my partner Nick, whose mom I have a really intimate relationship with, are going to yeet the opposition's plan. I will first focus on the reasons why their plan is bad, and then go to touch upon their wrong advantages. So disadvantage one, I'm going to call, I wonder who started the nuclear arms race. All right, so to begin, we can do all of what our opponents are proposing without creating a space force that will become some Star Wars-esque galactic empire. The United States is the most dominant military power in the entire world, which means other countries are not going to attack us unless they have a reason to. No one wants to attack us, as many other countries have learned the hard way. So also, there is no need for another branch of defense when we already could nuke an entire country with a Thanos snap. If the satellites in question were really set up to do anything else than preempt the US doing something stupid, they would have already used them to destroy our existing satellites. Everyone is welcome to check their phones right now, though, to see if any satellites have been destroyed in the last couple minutes. Like, go ahead. Yeah, I think they're still working. All right. So no one is saying, hey, let's let Russia take over communism 2.0, woo. That's really not what we're saying, but what we are saying is that instead of creating a military, we need to initiate diplomatic relations with other countries and possibly, if needed, the aliens. All right, so going on disadvantage 2, my partner already stated why this would cost $13 billion in funding. What are other things we could invest in with $13 billion, you ask? It is estimated by the LA Homeless Centers Authority that opening a year-round shelter that would fit every homeless person in Los Angeles would cost about $657 million, and then $357 million for each following year. To put everything in perspective, the United States already spends $700 billion, or 54% of our annual funds, on the military. It would take roughly $173 billion to give every American living in poverty right now enough money to have them be considered above the poverty line. So, changing the lives of more than 45 million people who currently are starving and on the streets. In addition, building weaponry, uniforms, and the like creates carbon emissions. According to the International Panel on Climate Change, we have until 2030 to reduce our emissions by 40% before we are plunged into the quote-unquote no turning back zone of global warming that will inevitably lead to the extinction of our species. I know, really kind of dark. Yeah. So we as Americans have to make a choice. Do we do our opponent's plan and further global warming, and do nothing to invest in other things that could actually help the population while combating an imaginary threat? Or do we stand our ground and say, hey, wait a minute, this sucks? Let's spend this money creating new green technology, new sources of renewable energy, or helping our people live the most fulfilling lives possible while we still can. Also, to their meme thing, instead of building a space force, we could also invest $1 billion into the meme industry. Just as a suggestion. All right, so going on to their points real quick. Going to national security, I really hope you as the audience take my partner's wonderful analogy about how shooting someone, even if they do have a Mustang and you have a Toyota Prius, is wrong. Although I kind of sympathize and I kind of understand why you would do so. It's your own fault for buying a Prius. Like, I'm sorry, but it is. All right. So as Nick stated, other countries are only building satellites to preempt any military-based action that the United States might irrationally take. Furthermore, we don't need a bunch of satellites to protect us from imaginary threats, since again, as my opponents have even stated, no one's gonna attack us. I think we can all agree that war is bad, and the United States military is really good, but at fighting in wars, not terraforming. Satellites in the sky is not a threat to us. As of 2018, the United States currently has 830 satellites up in space, compared to China's 380. We already have the most satellite infrastructure, so there's no reason we need more space defense. We don't want to threaten other countries with stormtrooper-adjacent people with guns taking over the sky and trying to own space, which really isn't even ours to colonize, let's be real. The only reason that China and Russia would potentially attack us if we created a whole new military force, which would probably cause an unironic Star Wars, is that we do stuff first. The only reason we would need more space power is so we could control, abuse, and dominate kinky, Nick. What other countries? So going on to Advantage 2 real quick, Star Trek. Extending on what my partner has said, do we really want Donald Darth Vader in charge of a whole Space Force? That will, contrary to our opponent's misguided beliefs, lead to a whole space military that will most definitely not be used for either resource collection or space exploration. When we want to explore other planets and locations, we send NASA's astronauts or top scientists. If you think about their ridiculous suggestions in regards to Earth, they're basically saying the military here sends their Marines to help mine coal and purify contaminated water. Which would be cool, but it doesn't. So their plan will not lead to any kind of ideal society, but in the points I listed, we could actually help the homeless, or help people in poverty, or maybe just revolutionize, I can't say that word, but help the meme community out quite a lot. So you're going to prefer any one of those, maybe not one or the other, in no particular order, but obviously, the meme one's pretty high up there. So if our opponents really cared about space resources so bad, they would advocate for research teams, to advocate for the properties of different planets, to see if they have useful resources, or send, astronauts to further our knowledge of their habitability. Not create a new military branch, which will not solve anything. And saying we are going to be a peaceful Star Trek-esque military force is fundamentally an oxymoron, because that's not a thing. In short, we are better off trying to be guardians of the galaxy than we would be by initiating Operation Thanos Was Right. In conclusion, affirmative team, our facts do not care about your feelings. Thank you.
All right, I'm sorry, I'm back. I'll be quick. Alrighty. Perfect. Throughout the course of this debate, you have listened to both teams make their cases. My partner and I, the negative team, have explained to you why it is that the establishment of a space force would be catastrophic, and you have also listened to Kyle and Kirsten, the wrong team, tell you why it is that you should risk it anyway. My partner and I have explained to you that the creation of a space force would be disastrous. Firstly, it would put national security at risk. The United States has a long history of forcing its will upon weaker nations, and such a long history of doing this has brought us to the point where now they are arming their satellites. If we force them into a corner, they are going to respond, and they are going to respond with force. It would be wasteful. We don't need to consume tremendous amounts of resources for a foolish plan like this when we could be using them to solve problems here on this planet. I think it kind of makes the most sense to do that before we start planet hopping, ruining one planet after another, kind of like humans are basically space Ebola, so that would probably be a bad choice. We need to be pumping this money into our economy and investing it in alternative energies to combat climate change. Now, the affirmative team, with their plan, makes us less safe, not more like they would lead you to believe, because they provoke the rest of the world to action that they have otherwise not yet taken. Now, finally, the most important thing that we need to talk about in this round is please do not buy the Star Trek argument. They are suggesting that we are going to become the Federation. So please just stop for a moment, let's just do a common sense thinking exercise. Let's stop for a moment and think, who is it that we are talking about when we talk about the United States federal government? The affirmative team honestly expects you, a room full of college students, to believe that the United States government is going to create a space military and then not abuse it. Now, not only that, they expect you to believe that they are going to promote an egalitarian, peaceful society, and we're going to have all these diplomats and scientists running all over the galaxy performing all these awesome tasks, and we're going to be talking to aliens, and we're going to be doing cultural exchanges, and we're probably going to have study abroad on Mars, and it's going to be awesome. But that being said, if we get anything, We get the Galactic Empire. We get Darth Vader and Emperor Palpatine commanding their Imperial fleet across the galaxy and destroying whatever life refuses to do their will. We get a Death Star, but no Luke Skywalker. And for these reasons, vote for the negative team. Thank you.
Geez, how do you feel after that one? You guys want to give another just round of applause for my fellow debaters here? They're wonderful. They're all really talented people. You should come join us because then you can also be wonderful, talented people, you know. Tough crowd. All right, just to go through this debate one more time. There's two words that have been largely ignored, and it's probably the main reason why you would want to vote for the affirmative. Those words are roaming dragon. Right, you remember that time when we mentioned that there was a anti-satellite satellite specifically designed to destroy our satellites? It's called the roaming dragon. We do not have any defense for this right now. We don't have a roaming dragon. So why would we not seek to achieve equal military strength? As the negation said, we have the most powerful military in possibly the galaxy, maybe the universe. Right? Like we couldn't just blow up like nations. We could blow up the world. I mean, we could probably nuke the sun at this point. It's terrifying. And for this reason, as previously stated, nobody wants to attack us. So there's a question which has to be asked. If you like not being attacked because of the size of your military, why would you want to give up that advantage? Personally, I like it every day when I wake up and my cell phone works and China isn't invading us. It's wonderful and glorious. There's some other things I want to talk about. So we talked about homelessness, and this is, I mean, come on, everybody wants to solve homelessness. Not a lot to say there, except that if we go extinct as a species in a planet in 12 years, and how do we get here? Well, the problem is, even if we reduce all of our carbon emissions, which isn't possible without tanking the economy and then everybody dies anyways, but the United States only accounts for about 15% of global emissions. So even if we accomplish this, we get nowhere close to the level of carbon emission reduction that the International Panel on Climate Change has suggested, right? So we would do this, we invest all this money, we wouldn't be able to get out there in the enterprise, and then at the end of the day, if other nations don't keep up, we all die anyways. This is a very good reason why we should have a space force. The other reason, which also went largely ignored, is space pirates. You guys, we have to fight against the space pirates, possibly the Klingons. We don't know yet, but it's a thing. Let's see. Our threats are not imaginary. We are actively engaged in what is already an escalation. We are already seeking to maintain the balance of power through an arms race. An arms race is what it's called when two countries develop technology that's used in the military. That's what we're doing now. The problem is we're losing. I don't know about you, but I don't like to lose. So, this wasn't the debate for me. And additionally, they say that the military is good at fighting, but not really good at building. I think the Army Corps of Engineers would significantly disagree with you. Also, a quick shout out to any military personnel we have out there in the audience. We appreciate all the hospital buildings that you erect and the food you distribute for suffering populations. You're wonderful. So, you should be thankful for them. Anyways, we are currently locked in this battle. And if we lose, as previously stated, we could be looking at President Vlad. Could be looking at that anyways, but we should take whatever measures are possible to ensure against this future. And for that reason, you should vote for the affirmative. Thank you.
One thing I remember, do it for the meme.
Yeah. I guess I'll just go on.
Yeah, you just start now.
That was a great debate, Nicholas. Who do you think won?
I think that it's obvious that Kyle and Kirsten won. I mean, both teams did fight for the meme, but there was the idea of the space wizard that was going to happen with the Space Force. But the only space wizard that was talked about was Bernie Sanders, and he's would seem a lot like Obi-Wan to me, and I would trust Obi-Wan with the Galactic Empire.
Are you kidding me? Did you even hear what what the affirmation was saying? They were arguing Star Trek over Star Wars. That's insane. Since when has Star Trek been relevant?
Instead of starting another debate here, folks, we're going to move on to our next event. Tonight, we have a dramatic interpretation piece by Joseph Stommel. Dramatic interpretation is where a person takes cuttings of a play or movie and interprets it dramatically. It's essentially just like a well-done theater performance, except it does not include the lighting or the costumes.
So you're saying dramatic interpretation is basically an interpretation that's dramatic.
Well, you're not wrong. Okay, that one hurt a little bit. But back to Joseph. Joseph has been working on his piece the entire semester. He recently performed his piece at the Spring Fling Tournament and won bronze. Without further ado, here's Joseph with Picasso at the La Paix Agile.
Let's go, Joe!
Oh, you have one. Oops.
I have been thinking about sex all day. Can't wait to get it out of my head. I drew 16 drawings today. 2 in pencil, the rest in ink, all women. What does that tell you? It tells me that a painter has got to stay well loved. Otherwise, the mind drifts off the easel, out the window, and across the street to the grocer's daughter. You see, I am a theorist. And the way I see it is that there is just as much chance of my date walking into here accidentally as there is of her walking into the Bar Rouge on purpose. So where I wait for her is of no importance. It is of no importance where I tell her I will be, and least of all, it is not important what time I am to meet her. Pablo Picasso and Albert Einstein were 2 of the most influential people during the 20th century. Picasso's artwork changed the way we understood art, and Einstein's work fundamentally changed the way we understood the world. The 20th century was a time of huge progress that brought the importance of art and science above that of politics. Renowned German playwright Bertolt Brecht once said, "Art and science coincide so far as both aim to improve the lives of men and women." In fact, Winston Churchill, one of the 20th century's most influential politicians, refused to cut funding for the arts in order to help pay for the war, supposedly asking, what would we be fighting for? Steve Martin addresses the value and consequence of both art and science in his play, Picasso at the La Paix Agile. It's all in the wrist, and the wrist starts here. There is nothing in my way anymore. If I can think it, I can draw it. It used to be, I'd have an idea, and then a month later, I'd draw it. The idea was a month ahead of its execution. Now, the idea is ahead of the pencil only by minutes. Soon, they will be simultaneous. Do you have any idea what that's like? I have a vague idea. Are you an artist? No, I am a scientist. But sometimes I feel like an artist. Well, multiply it by 1,000 and you know what it's like to be me. Here's the difference between you and me. You look at that nasty old scene on the wall and you see a picture of some sheep in a landscape. Me, I see it differently. I see an empty frame with something hideous in it. It's waiting to be filled up with something new. Advancing out into the unknown, the undrawn, it must be coaxed out of its cave, wrestled with, then hung upon the wall like a hide. When I look at Goya, I feel as though he's reaching his hand through the centuries to touch me on the shoulder. Whenever I paint, I feel as though I too am reaching my hand forward hundreds of years to touch somebody too. I work the same way. I make beautiful things with a pencil. You? You're just a scientist. For me, the shortest distance between 2 points is not a straight line. Likewise. Well, let us see one of your creations. Draw! Done. It's perfect. Thank you. I was talking about mine. It's a formula. So's yours. Yours is letters. Yours is lines. My lines mean something. And mine don't. Maybe you're a fake. And maybe you're an idiot savant. Hold the savant. They're not so much going to change the century as bend it. Let's say Picasso here is a genius. Century is just flying alone in space when it whizzes by. Picasso here picks up speed and flings itself in a new direction. Century is just zigzagging along, bending and curving, influenced by the powerful gravity of people like Picasso. But the century itself, because we are in it, appears to be heading straight. How can something be curved but appear to be straight? Come on, buddy. How about the horizon, you nitwit? I'm just trying to explain something. Not only is the horizon something that is curved but appears to be straight, but so is space in general. Horseshit. Well, it just so happens that it is. And not only is space curved, but light has mass, and it bends when it passes by large masses, like the sun, at a finite speed, regardless of the motion at its source. I can't believe I just blurted out the ending to my book. What I said is my business, and I hope it won't leave this room. I'm glad you stopped me. I was just headed for the phone. So tell me, Picasso, how do you draw something? Well, I put the pencil to the paper, and it comes out. Not the craft, mind you. That was difficult to get. The ideas are a different matter. They swoop down on me. They fall like rain. They land with a crash. And they thunk, too. Absolutely, they sunk. You too? Yes, yes. And pop! Well, pop all the time. That goes without saying. They never seem to flow, though. Before me, artists used to get their ideas from the distant past. But as of this moment, they are coming from the future, fast and loose. Absolutely, the future. Well, hello there. What brings you here? Well, I kind of like surprising people. You know, popping up where I'm least expected. Thought I'd do a little time traveling. I don't believe we've met. Oh, yes, we will. You and I think alike. Thank you. Thank you very much. Who are you, by the way? Well, I guess you could say I'm a messenger from the future. And what is the message? Are you ready to receive it? Yes. I could dream it forever and still not do it. But when the time comes for it to be ready, God, I want to be ready. At that moment, I'm dreaming for the billions yet to come. I'm speaking for everyone. I want the time to make enough things. And that's what we do best. We make things. I want to leave the world littered with beauty. I want to make Newton's apple leap back into the tree. I want to come at them through the radio and break their hearts. I want them to see the 1,000 years of tenderness in a woman combing her hair. I want to take them at light speed to the edge of the universe. I want them to be not so lonesome tonight. I want to toast the 20th century. Why? Heck, I know why. In the 20th century, no movement will be as glorious as the movement of the line across the paper, the note across the staff, or the idea across the mind.
You know, that was very dramatic.
And interpretive.
For some context, a dramatic interpretation piece takes hours upon hours of hard work and dedication to put together. While plenty of work does go into debates, a dramatic interpretation piece takes some serious fine-tuning. Let's have another round of applause for Joseph.
Now, after that wonderful performance by Joseph, let's move on to our next event.
Our third event of the night is a persuasive speech by Kayla Flaherty. Kayla is actually a fellow Com 1 student who was invited to perform her amazing speech for us all tonight, as well as represent SRJC at the last tournament of this season 2 weeks ago, where she did fantastic.
Persuasive is a style of speech meant to persuade. It contains informational elements, but ultimately intends to change your mind.
So imagine those conversations over the holidays with your relatives that you only see at the holidays, but in this case, there's actual facts and information being shared.
Let's get a round of applause to welcome Kayla.
Imagine a place where humans can decide what beneficial genes they want to add to their bodies and what negative factors they want to omit. You go into a lab, you tell a scientist, inject me with something that guarantees I won't age, or give me something that ensures no illness for the rest of my life. Some of you may be thinking, sounds pretty cool. Well, the rest of you may be thinking, sounds bizarre, or not for me. Well, essentially, this is what happens for something to be considered genetically modified. While sometimes referred to as frankenfoods, GMO stands for genetically modified organisms. In order for something to be genetically modified, it means that a portion of DNA is taken from one organism and inserted into another with the end goal of producing desirable characteristics. In the US, genetically modified or GM foods are extremely common. About 92% of corn and 94% of soy in the US is genetically modified. The US Food and Drug Administration needs to pass a specific law that regulates the production of GM foods such as corn and soy, making it safer for the public. Today, I will go over a known chemical that hides within some of these GM foods. Then I will discuss the harmful health effects that a toxin within them may bring to the consumer, followed by some common misconceptions towards GM foods, and lastly, what we can do to put an end to this practice. So originally, GM foods sought to decrease pesticide use, but now these foods have dramatically increased the use of pesticides along with herbicides, which has had a domino effect on the amount of chemicals that we are ingesting. GM crops are bred to be tolerant to pests and weeds. According to Beth Hoffman, a reporter for the food and agriculture sector of Forbes magazine, 73% of all corn is now genetically modified to withstand the chemicals produced to kill competing weeds. But while these crops are resistant to pests, the weeds that grow around them are not. And this urges farmers to kill the weeds by spraying both the crop and weeds with pesticides and herbicides. According to clinical nutritionist Melissa Smith, while these pesticides cover the crop in chemicals, they also make their way into the crop themselves, surrounding area of the crop, and soil of the crop. One of the most commonly used herbicides is known as Roundup, produced by the company Monsanto. Glyphosate is an active ingredient in one of the most harmful chemicals found in Roundup. According to Dr. Mills of Family Medicine and Public Health, since the introduction of GMOs in 1996, Americans' exposure to glyphosate has increased by 500%. Meanwhile, according to the World Health Organization's Cancer Research Agency, glyphosate is a probable carcinogen. A study conducted by the biologists among cell chemical biology found strong links between glyphosate and fatty liver disease, liver cirrhosis, breast cancer cell growth, and other cancers. Currently, there are more than 650 lawsuits against the Roundup producer Monsanto. Those suing are stating that exposure to this herbicide have caused them or their loved ones to develop non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and that Monsanto has covered up the risks. About a month ago, a Sonoma County resident was awarded $80 million from a federal jury as a result of being diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma due to his consistent use of Roundup. Additionally, there are more than 9,000 similar actions against Monsanto pending in state courts. So, now that we know about the most common of the chemicals, let's focus on a toxin produced by some GM foods and the health effects that follow. While GM foods have not been thoroughly tested for human consumption, the American Academy of Environmental Medicine, known as the AAEM, have noticed GM foods to be playing a role in our nation's health crisis. Furthermore, the AAEM state that GM foods pose a serious health risk in the areas relating to toxicology, allergy, immune function, and reproductive, genetic, and physiologic health. A study conducted by the Center for Genetic Engineering and Biotechnology fed mice GM corn. They found a toxin referred to as Bt toxin present in the mice produced by this corn. This toxin dramatically disrupted the immune function in their gut. Similarly, a study done by the Institute for Responsible Technology, known as the IRT, found health complications from the same GM corn toxin. It was found that Bt toxin may either trigger or further aggravate a gluten-related disorder, such as celiac disease. Those who were sensitive to gluten and ate this corn were found to have damage to their intestinal wall, a lack of gut bacteria, and impaired digestion. Additional studies by the IRT examined the health complications of this GM corn on animals and humans. Animals were shown to have organ damage, accelerated aging, infertility, and gastrointestinal and immune system disorders. Humans were found to have leftover materials, such as toxins and chemicals inside of them from these GM foods. Such leftover materials do have links to the long-term problems of a rise in allergies, rise in cancers, and lack of immune function. So, if there have been numerous studies linking these adverse health effects to these GM foods, why are so many of us so ignorant to the health issues that these foods are bringing us? Well, today, there is still controversy and misunderstandings over the matter that GM foods benefit our economy and at times our environment. In a nation of economic inequality, GM foods are far more affordable than most foods. Their high and large yields attempt to battle world hunger, and their genetically altered DNA make them resistant to disease, which decreases food waste. But while these foods may be somewhat advantageous to ourselves and our economy, they are not worth the cost to our health. In addition to these adverse health effects, GM foods support the obesity epidemic. The World Center for Disease Control and Prevention have noticed that since the introduction of GMOs, our obesity epidemic has continued to accelerate dramatically. Over 80% of processed foods contain GM foods. Anything containing high fructose corn syrup, canola oil, or soybean oil are all genetically modified, and that account for almost all processed foods. So, as a nation, what should we do about this? The U.S. Food and Drug Administration needs to pass a specific law requiring all GM foods to be tested for toxins and chemicals prior to consumption by the public. There should be labs that are exclusive to testing GM foods only. This way, any new toxin or chemical brought into the lab can be traced back to the GM food being tested. Each crop should be extensively tested for years until they are fully clear and safe of any toxin or chemical that is determined as harmful to human health. This way, scientists will be able to factor out and abolish any potential threat to human wellness. And while this law could increase the overall well-being of humans, it also has the potential of curbing our obesity epidemic as well. Although, with the knowledge of how long our government takes to pass legislation, what can we do personally? Well, first, we need to start viewing GM foods for what they really are, a threat to our environment and our health. As individuals, we can advise one another to seek out those non-GMO labels when grocery shopping. When buying produce, we can support farms within our community by buying local, organic produce. As a community, we can support farms. We can also just support the anti-GMO campaigns. Nonprofit organizations such as the Non-GMO Project or the Just Label It campaign push for legislation against GMO foods. In general, many of us do not consider or even pay attention to whether or not what we are eating has been genetically altered in some way. Food is not like it used to be. In today's society, you need to put a lot of thought into what you are about to eat. We now need to consider the potential effect that corn tortilla or corn fructose-filled lollipop may have on our health. We need to start educating our friends and family on the future that these foods may bring to us. Do you want to continue jeopardizing your health? What about the health of your loved ones? All you need to do is eat healthier and search for those labels. It is as simple as that, because I can assure you all that you do not want to become the next Frankenfood.
That was a wonderful speech. Very well done.
It was great. Food for thought.
Get out.
You're just mad because you didn't think of the joke first.
Once again, thank you, Kayla, for coming out here tonight. Finally, on to our last event of the night, IPDA.
IPDA is designed to be a layman's debate, without tons of jargon, and to be centered around persuasion. In our parliamentary debate round today, we already did trim out the jargon, but what you will see here with IPDA, aside from maybe the topic and the content, will be what you would normally see in the event. It is one-on-one, and the competitors are given 30 minutes to prepare their arguments.
So basically, IPDA debate is debate for people who want actual life skills.
You're assuming that we have lives outside of debate. For IPDA, we have back with us Nick Riley and Kyle Lowry.
Nick got bronze at both the state and national competitions, and Kyle won gold at the California State Championship.
Furthermore, Nick was the 5th place speaker for IPDA at the national championship out of over 150 competitors. At the same time, he managed to win every single preliminary round, which is almost unheard of.
I am certain you will all enjoy this debate. Here we will be showcasing what two experienced debaters can do with a very funny topic.
For this debate, the topic will be, the US federal government should annex Canada. What do you think about that one, Lindsay?
Honestly, I just want America to get bigger, annex Canada, annex everywhere.
Honestly, if anything should be happening, Canada should just annex us. Canucks should be annexing everywhere. Canadian world order.
All right, now, Nicholas, let's leave the dramatic interpretation to Joseph, and let's get this debate going.
Let the battle of the bromance commence.
Hi, everyone. I'm really sorry you have to listen to me again. I'm going to try to make this as painless for you guys as I can, but this is probably going to hurt Kyle a little bit. Now, for this debate, I will actually be affirming the resolution. Now, what that means is, rather than just tell you why Kyle's ideas are bad, I'm actually going to have to prove to you that I have a good idea or two in my head. Which is exactly why I will be arguing that the United States should annex Canada. Now, just to get this out of the way, just avoid any headaches, and I want to make it very simple for Kyle, because Kyle's one of my best buds, and I appreciate you, Kyle. I want to clarify what I mean by annex Canada. I am not suggesting that we politely ask the Canadians to join us. I am talking about conquering all of Canada and its assumption as part of the United States. Now that we're clear what I mean, I want to move on to my first argument, which is the need to combat Canadian aggression. So, before I tell all of you why it is that we should annex Canada, I want to get this out of the way. I want to lay out the logistics for anyone that is oblivious to how much better we are than them, and make it perfectly clear that we can annex Canada, and that it would not be difficult at all. So let's talk about some numbers, because Kyle likes those. The United States is currently ranked number 1 in terms of global firepower, while Canada is ranked number 21. The United States has a population of 330 million people, while Canada has a population of 36 million people, also less than the population of California, I might add, so maybe we should just conquer them, because we probably could. The US has a defense budget of $716 billion, thank you, Congress, while Canada has a defense budget of $21.2 billion. And by international standards of what is considered an aircraft carrier, the United States has 24 aircraft carriers, more than the rest of the world combined, while Canada has a whopping 0. Now, I could go on and on and on and on and on about the comparable weaknesses of the Canadian military to our own, but I think I've made my point clear. You're welcome, Kyle. There is no argument against why we can't conquer Canada. Now, all I have to do is convince everyone in this room why we should. This is going to be fun. 16 kilometers off the coast of Maine, I'm even using Canadian measurements, lies Machias Seal Island. Remember that name. This island, which is part of the state of Maine, is populated by seabirds such as the Atlantic puffin, graduate students from the University of New Brunswick who visit during the spring, but most importantly, a lighthouse, one lighthouse, and an aggressive Canadian military force on the island. This lighthouse is key to regional security and is an immediate threat to our national sovereignty, and the troops there could easily be undercover operatives trying to stage a takeover of the entire United States, state by state, beginning with Maine. Now, Canada refuses to recognize the United States' claim of this island as part of the state of Maine, and it has actually stationed Canadian Coast Guardsmen on the island, which constitutes, by international standards, a foreign invasion and occupation of sovereign U.S. territory. And it is our responsibility as the United States of America to resist and combat foreign occupation. And if that is not a good enough reason for every single one of you, need I remind you the time that British troops, from Canada I might add, burnt down the White House, and I think that's a good enough reason to get them back for it, which actually brings me to my second argument. Now, my second argument is all about the money. My second argument for why we should annex Canada is for economic benefit. Canada has tremendous amounts of natural resources within its borders, primarily located in the oil sands of Alberta, which uniquely is actually the part of Canada which is currently having grumbling about leaving Canada. So I think we should just kind of speed the process up, just help them out a little bit and just take it. An annexation of Canada would also entirely eliminate any issues concerning tariffs between our two nations. Canada has placed tremendously high taxes on US goods being sold in Canada, and our current administration has responded by placing tariffs on Canadian goods sold within the United States. Now, for those of us that aren't quite economically savvy, I understand it's kind of complicated, so I'll explain what that actually means. This means that it drives up the prices of Canadian goods in the United States and American goods in Canada. So what that means is the politicians don't suffer for it. Everyone in this room just pays more for Canadian stuff sold here, which kind of sucks. Maple syrup's really expensive now. So what I'm trying to tell you is we don't have to worry about Canadian tariffs and higher prices placed on goods if we just take their country. Problem solved. Now, so what I am saying, and I'm going to say it very bluntly because I want to be honest for Kyle, because he's got to try to argue against this brilliant plan of mine. What I am saying is Canada has lots of nice stuff and we should take it. So, if you do not buy this argument, we at least need to annex their country for the sole purpose of forcing them to call ham by its proper name. Now, I want to wrap this up because I've probably overwhelmed my opponent. To summarize, tonight, you should vote for me, the affirmative speaker. We must annex Canada in order to combat their aggression, get their cool stuff, and to make them stop making a mockery out of bacon. Thank you. And with that, I am open to questioning.
Just so you guys know, we do have a lot of other incredibly talented, wonderful debaters. It's not just Nick and I. But the bromance is real.
I love you.
So, Nick, I'm not going to question you about our capacity to conquer Canada because
Good plan.
you're right.
Yeah.
So, but I do want to know, what is our relationship going to be like with Canada after this done? Are we going to have like a Puerto Rico kind of situation, or like what is our international relationships
You know,
going to be like?
I'm actually really glad that you asked that. And ultimately, it's up to the Canadians, depending on how it is they behave. Listen, okay, all I'm saying, listen, let's say that we take Canada, all of it, okay? We take Canada, and the Canadians are very well behaved, and they accept their fate. If that is the case, I am perfectly okay with actually making all of Canada one state. We can do that. We can make Canada all of one state, and they can be American citizens. But in the event that they decide to throw a temper tantrum, I'm considering, again, I'm not in charge, but I would consider giving them like the same territorial status as like American Samoa, like make them part of our country, but don't let them vote, you know, something like that. Yeah.
That's a hot take, dude.
Yeah.
Samoans, if you're out there, we're sorry, we love you. So I'm sorry, can you go over again? What kind of military force are we talking about on this island?
They are Canadian Coast Guardsmen.
Like how many?
2. You weren't supposed to ask.
I don't know if we want to get in the middle of that bloodbath.
No, it's 2. They actually have rotating shifts at the lighthouse. But yeah.
You're right. That's pretty overwhelming force.
Yeah.
So we're going to go to war over 2 Canadian guys hanging out in a lighthouse on an unpopulated island?
Yes. No. It sounds ridiculous, I know, but believe me. If we give the Canadians an island, next they're going to want all of Maine, and then they're going to want the surrounding states. And if we give them an inch, they're going to take a lot of miles, not one. So, yeah, we have to draw the line somewhere. We can't just say, oh, it's okay if there's only, 2 Canadian
Okay, thank you, Nick.
Coast Guardsmen. Hey. But yeah, I am willing to go to war over this.
You don't know, he's actually really excited about this resolution. Can you, on the economic side, can you give me an example of a country that we trade with and we don't have tariffs?
Have tariffs on them or them on us?
Both.
No, there are none.
On the truly important thing here. Germany calls red onions blue onions. Mm-hmm. Should we go to war with them next?
We've done it before. Twice, actually. I think that we could do it again, but I am more focused on the Canadian menace than the German one. Yeah.
Thank you, Nick.
You're welcome.
I don't know if you caught it in the introduction, but they said that Nick is Ava's punching bag, and it turns out that I am Nick's punching bag, so it goes around. Just kidding, we're all friends. Okay. So, let me tell you briefly why this is a terrible idea. I'm not going to be arguing that we couldn't do it. We could very, very, very clearly do it. It would be so easy. Okay, the first reason why this is bad is that Canada, it turns out, is actually like one of our allies in this world. And there's, aside from the capacity to do such a thing, there's a question which we have to ask ourselves, which is, what are our values and what are our principles, and how do we want to treat our international partners, our friends, essentially? And Canada is our friend. I just want to note, we burned down their version of the White House first. So, addition to essentially just acting immorally, if we do this, we face potential international backlash. We have many allies all around the world that we trade with, who are partners, they back us up, they're part of NATO, all of these things. And if we're looking at encroaching on our friends in the international community's sovereignty, then we're looking at potential international backlash. And generally, if we face an embargo, then we're looking at not having support militarily, which is bad because we like to hedge our funds, and also to being damaged economically. The fact is that we need to trade with people. And as much fun as it is invading other countries, if we do this constantly, then it actually outweighs economically the benefits we'd get from free trade, which is kind of what he's describing as colonialism, but that's cool. So avoiding this plan allows us to maintain good diplomatic relationships so that we don't have to waste money fighting unnecessary wars with the entire world because that's a thing we do. So on to my second reason why this is bad. There was this thing that happened 20 years ago. That's not quite that long, but it was called the invasion of Iraq. And it was super successful. We literally toppled the government in a week. But you might have noticed, we're not out of Iraq yet. If you'll also notice that the affirmative team didn't have an actual plan of what we're going to do after we annexed Canada, kind of like how we didn't have an actual plan after what we were going to do after we toppled Iraq. The fact is that we are really wonderful in the terror that is our military might. Unquestionably. But we're not so good with the execution of what we do afterwards. And the fact is that if we do this, we're looking at tens of trillions of dollars like we've already spent. We're looking at lost American lives. We're looking at lost Canadian lives over Canadian insurgents. Two words you never thought you'd hear together. And all of this is not beneficial to the United States. Now, on to the affirmative cases. On the first advantage of Canadian aggression, the fact is that Coast Guardsmen are they're just out there operating a lighthouse, which is preventing ships from, crashing into the island, and also from maybe preventing, stupid college kids, no offense, that's us, from drowning in the ocean. And they're doing this for free. I don't know if you noticed this, but they're performing these services for us, and we don't have to pay for them. That's a good thing. The fact is that even though Nick is right, this is in fact our territory. I've looked it up on a map, guys. It's super legit. It's super closer to America. It's definitely American property. But the fact is you don't burn down your neighbor's house because his dog poops on your yard. That's insane. So the second reason why this is bad is onto the economic gain we would get from it. As stated in our cross-examination, we have tariffs with every single country that we trade with. The fact is, you might have heard of something called a free trade agreement. These are necessary because these are giant, 10,000-page documents which cover everything from copyright protections to tariffs. So this is just a thing which happens, and we negotiate it, and everything works out. The fact is that there's friction that is caused through these tariffs, but it's not as much of an economic drain as it is, going to war with the entire world. Even though we'd probably win. It's still more cost-effective to just deal with tariffs than to go to war with them. And for those reasons, you should vote for the negation.
So Kyle,
yes, I love you.
Thank you. You say that Canada is an ally of ours and that we should not annex them. Quick question. What kind of an ally invades its ally?
You mean the kind that performs a free service for them?
I guess that's one way of looking at it. Let's move on to the next question. You also said something to the extent, you made the argument that was basically just because we can do it doesn't mean we should. That being said, how do you feel about the justification for this annexation and this invasion and occupation, given that Canada started the conflict? Do we have more moral grounds to do so, or?
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome.
But not to the extent that you're suggesting.
So just not as much as I'm calling for, but like a little invasion would be okay?
I mean, we can
Just like take part of Canada,
just
maybe?
invade
or-
the Maquia Seal Island. That'd be fair.
No, that's. But how would they
can
ever?
push out that
How
first.
would they ever learn? Also, you painted this picture for everyone that was really nice. It was sweet. You talked about these Coast Guardsmen, these two brave heroes rescuing college kids from the icy waters that surround Maquia Seal Island that they would be swimming in to begin with. But tell me, why is it that you seem to love enemy combatants more than your own country?
First off, people fall out of boats. It's a thing.
Yeah, you're right.
And secondly, I don't. It's for my countrymen that I don't want to waste their time and their money doing something so unnecessary.
So, last
Vote for
question.
Kyle 2020.
All right, I'll stop baiting you, but I do have one more question. Why should we care more about what the rest of the world thinks of us than we care about protecting our national sovereignty?
We shouldn't. We don't act nicely because we care what they think. We do it because we want their cool stuff.
All right, this is going to be fun. I want to begin by addressing the arguments that my opponent has just made before I go back to defending my arguments. Let's start with the first one, talking about the international community and Canada as our ally and our response by our other allies. So, I actually asked him during cross-examination what kind of an ally launches an invasion of another ally. The correct answer was Canada. Canada has invaded its ally, which is us, which shows me that they are clearly not a true ally of ours. And that being said, with regards to what our other allies think of us, if they were our allies, if they really cared about us, then they would have stepped in when Canada aggressed upon us. They would have come to our defense, and they chose not to do so. So I don't really seem to care what our allies think, because they haven't really done much for us up till this point. And with regards to the international backlash, it is insignificant. The rest of the world clearly doesn't care enough about us to stop Canadian violence against us, so why should we care about them? Now, let's move on to the second argument. He talked about Iraq a little bit, and he said just because we can do this thing doesn't mean that we should do it, and we can learn from Iraq's example. These are two completely different things. Iraq never invaded the United States, contrary to what your uncle tells you at the dinner table. They did not. Canada did. So, when you talk about just because we can doesn't mean we should, in the instance of Canada, yeah, we should. Absolutely. So with his arguments in the garbage can, let's talk about mine. He talked about stopping college kids from drowning, and I thought that that was a lovely image, but I think I'm going to give you a little bit more accurate one. These are not heroes sitting in this lighthouse, and they see a kid drowning, and they rush out to go save them. These are two violent, evil, aggressive, maple syrup-loving snow livers. And they are just aggressively and violently sitting in that lighthouse, scheming about what they're going to do next. And in the event that maybe an American is drowning, maybe they might not help them. I need to remind you, this is an American island. It wouldn't be unreasonable to assume Americans are going to show up every once in a while. We need to stop them right now, before they decide that they're going to take more. Now let's talk about money. My opponent correctly, I'll grant him that, correctly brought up that there is not another country that we trade with that does not have some form of tariff against us. That's true. And you know what I say? Great, we can start knocking on their doors as soon as we're done beating the syrup out of the Canadians. Now, thank you for just giving me another reason why we shouldn't really care about the rest of the world. Thanks, because we're probably coming for them next. Now, we also desperately need the resources that Canada has. I've talked about the oil in Alberta. I want it. I imagine a few of you want it. I really want the oil, I'm not gonna lie. So that being said, I think that that's another good reason, and my opponent hasn't really disputed the fact that, technically speaking, if we did annex Canada, that would solve all of the tariffs between us and them. We wouldn't need to go to this negotiation every few years. We wouldn't need to have the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement to get them to drop some tariffs. We just make it part of the United States, and then they can't do it anymore. Now, to wrap this up in a nice, neat little bow, we can annex Canada. We should annex Canada to stop their aggression, to take their cool stuff, and to force them to use proper lunch meat nomenclature. Thank you.
He's like my Obi-Wan Kenobi, it's really rough. Don't chop off my legs. All right, so just to briefly go through this argumentation and summarize some of the arguments and explain why my plan is better. We should probably talk about briefly like what tariffs are. Tariffs are a tax which are placed by a country on its own citizens on imported goods. Now, with Canada placing tariffs, that's really just a tax on their own citizens, and it means that they don't buy as much of our stuff. But luckily, there's lots of countries, and we can sell our stuff lots of different places. Equally so, we have tariffs on other countries, which allows us to have some sort of domestic share of what we're selling. The point is that this is just like regular business in the international world. It's a really bad reason to go to war. Even if we could go to war with the whole planet, we probably could. But nonetheless, it is not economically feasible because wars are super expensive. And if you don't believe me, go check out the debt calculator right now. It's what, $21 trillion right now? It was $10 trillion, I believe, before we started the Iraq war. So, I mean, I guess we're going to do that in like 100, 200 other countries. That sounds glorious unless, you like having a functioning economy. So in terms of economic benefit, it's just better to deal with the friction that comes from having tariffs. And in terms of the military aggression, he's right. He's right and he's funny. It's hard. But he gets to have all the fun here. It's not fair. So I suggest that we can respond with a more measured military action that doesn't incur all the same costs as annexing Canada. It's a big place. We got to deal with tundra. We have to maintain a force there. We have to deal with Canadian insurgents. That'll be a thing. I suggest that we, send an entire Navy SEAL platoon there to deal with the current military presence. And then afterwards, we can just, circle 2 naval destroyers and have an aircraft nearby with constant around-the-clock F-16s flying overhead. All of this effectively accomplishes everything that we want to do to take back what is rightfully our island. But it doesn't incur all the costs that come along with annexing an entire sovereign country who also happens to be, as what was largely ignored, an ally. An ally who is definitely encroaching on our territory, but an ally nonetheless. We have to ask ourselves whether or not we want to be a country who reacts violently to a perceived insult, or if we want to be the kind of country that turns the other cheek. One of those actions is clearly better than the other. Especially considering the fact that, by all metrics, Canada is the 90-pound weakling, and we're like the buff dude on the beach. And nobody wants to be the guy kicking sand in the little guy's face. And alternatively, we can just leave Canada alone because they're operating a lighthouse for us. I don't know what the Canadian Coast Guard salary is, but I know that we don't have to pay for it, so that's pretty win-win as far as I'm concerned. And lastly, and most importantly, we need to talk about this lunch meat nomenclature. I concede, he's right. Bacon is bacon, and ham is ham. But Canada has the God-given right to be wrong about lunch meats. Thank you.
Oh, Kyle, how would they ever learn? This is going to be my last chance to address you all. And tonight, you have listened to myself, as well as the Maple Leaf Lover, make our arguments. And at the end of this speech, which I'm about to deliver, I am positive that I will have convinced every single one of you to vote to annex Canada. The United States should and can annex Canada. I'd like to start by addressing my opponent's first argument for my final time. I have explained already that Canada has proven itself to be someone that we cannot trust. We couldn't trust Canada not to invade us, and we couldn't trust the rest of our allies to come to our rescue. So now it's time to take matters into our own hands, regardless of what the United Kingdom thinks, regardless of what France thinks, and regardless of what Germany thinks. If they wanted to stop this, they had every opportunity to do so. They chose not to. Now, it's go time. We're going to take all of Canada, not just the island. That's not a lesson. That's a, hey, don't do it again because we asked nicely. All of it. Which brings me to his second argument, which again, as I've already mentioned, is essentially just saying that just because we can do something doesn't mean that we should do something. And I argue again that in the instance of Canada, yes, we should. Yes, we should because they started this conflict. Iraq didn't invade us, and look what we did to them. I think that when someone actually invades us, there should be some serious repercussions, regardless of the fact that Iraq is not currently the 51st state. Which, sorry about that, which brings me to my first argument. Now, my opponent has very conveniently chosen to ignore the fact that every single night, when he goes to sleep, when all of us go to sleep, there are two Canadian menaces violently sitting in their lighthouse on our island. This is a risk to our national security as well as our identity and Americans everywhere. This must be stopped. It must be stopped now, and it must be stopped violently, and I don't care what the rest of the world has to think about it. I don't care what Canada thinks about it, and I don't care what a Canada lover thinks about it. Which brings me to my second argument about money, because it's really important, believe it or not. Taking Canada would be great for us. We could get all of their natural resources. We could end up tariff-free. We wouldn't need to argue with them about what goes where when it comes to trading. And you know, like I said, the rest of the world absolutely does have tariffs on us, and they will get theirs in due time. But right now, we need to focus on the task in front of us, and that task is teaching Canadians a lesson. Now I'm going to wrap this up. In conclusion, we can annex Canada, and we should annex Canada. They messed with the bull, and now it's time to get the horns. So, you are going to be voting for me, the affirmative speaker tonight, in order to protect our national security by combating Canadian aggression. You are going to vote for me, the affirmative speaker, in order to get all of Canada's really cool stuff that I want. And you are going to vote for me, the affirmative speaker, to force Canadians to start calling meats by their correct names. Thank you.
Canadians, if you're out there, we're just joking. We're still friends.
Before we continue, again, for social reasons, that was all a joke, and I'm 98% sure this time that Nick didn't believe what he was saying. But that was probably the single greatest IPDA round I have ever witnessed. Sadly, I think that'll be the last one they will ever be able to do together since Nick's leaving us this semester.
I can finally breathe a little easier knowing the team will be a little bit less imperialist.
You know, don't worry. After that round, I think I can pick up the slack.
Well, with that, we have finally come to the end of our speech night. I hope you enjoyed the performances by each of our talented team members. We'd like to once again thank our dedicated coaches for making this year and this speech night possible.
Sorry, just a moment, everyone. But seriously, if you really enjoyed anything that you saw here tonight, please come down and speak with us after I again give the mic off to one last person. We did talk a lot about awards and accomplishments that our team members have achieved this semester, and at first that might sound a little intimidating. But what I want you all to understand is that it was the team itself and the process of being in the class together that prepared all of us individually for our success. Personally, I found success this last semester that I already spoken about, but last semester, I was, like all of you, actually sitting and watching this speech night of fall 2018, and here I am hosting it, and it's been a wonderful experience. Thank you all for coming tonight. We would love to have you with us next semester.
And let's face it, if Nicholas can do well, anyone can.
And with that, we're going to hand the mic off to Laura Ainsworth. Where'd she go?
Oh. Sneaking up on you. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. The last time I was asked to give a speech at Santa Rosa Junior College in front of a primarily student audience, although I can't see any of you, Mark Nelson and Susan Houlihan helped, I'm going to stick to my script, helped me obsessively to get my speech to perfection. Yeah, I know your pain, which is why none of my students are here, because they don't need extra credit. But we're here to talk about Quiet, Jake. We're here to talk about Hal, though, and Hal has had other careers, but his true calling is speech and debate, and he has helped thousands of individuals find and develop their voices. Our college's symbol is the oak tree, and Aristotle had quite a bit to say about the significance of the acorn and the oak, but we've been here for a while, and so just Google it so we can all go home. To make it brief, I will say that Hal is not only a mighty oak, which I believe Aristotle would have agreed with, but he has assisted so many others to stand tall. Aligned with Alexander Smith's belief that a man does not plant a tree for himself, he plants it for posterity, we understand that Hal's legacy is found in the belief that what one plants today becomes the enduring gift for tomorrow. What he does is selfless. His actions cannot return to him, and he may not see the full extent of their growth and blossoming. I have had many opportunities to view Hal's devotion and successes, but I'm giving a speech, so I have to pick a number of points. There are 4, and only 4, exactly 4, occasions to consider the overwhelming love that he has for his discipline, the college, his colleagues, and the students. The first occurred when a student detailed the memorable story about Hal's creative teaching methods. Being exceptional requires one to transcend traditional methods. This happens naturally and regularly for Hal. In one case, he had a student who was so nervous, you all know about nervousness, that she did not want to be looked at while delivering her speech. Hal immediately, without thinking about it, requested that everyone place their heads down on their desks. What an amazing, simple solution, but nobody in my field had thought of it. Definitely not Mark. What's common sense to him is genius to the rest of us. In addition to this type of continual creativity, Hal's commitment is also perpetual. While some of us are thrilled to arrive to our classes breathless with 3 minutes to spare, I wrote that years ago. I'm thrilled to arrive late, flat out late, 10 to 15 minutes. One semester, I noticed the glow of Hal's office light at 6:30 a.m., 3 hours before the start of his first class. That level of commitment is even more remarkable when you consider that he has also been known to return from grueling 3-day debate tournaments at 2 a.m. The third moment was at SRJC's debate tournament, in which a competitor was consistently awarded second place in multiple events, but then went on to win the overall award for the most points. Hal had witnessed her earlier disappointment, and he offered the final award with the most incredible lead-up and excitement. The competitor was not from our college, but the consummate coach celebrates the elements of success everywhere that they're present. Everyone knows that there are certain moments for which there are no words. In the fourth moment, Hal's actions left me stunned and speechless and exemplified his teaching excellence. A student who had temporarily surrendered to the double whammies of fear and fatigue was face down, sobbing on the floor in the hallway. Hal instantly got down on the floor and consoled and counseled her. I have never seen such a moment of raw compassion. Whether through creativity, commitment, compassion, or serving as the ultimate coach, Hal Sanford is the quintessence of inspiration. No matter who it is or when it happens, when someone has had the breath knocked out of them, he is there to breathe life back into them. Dr. Sanford, esteemed Esquire, turned phenomenal forensicator and coach, you have reminded us that one's worth and legacy is not in titles, lists, or checkbox qualities. It is found in the moments that are woven into others' lives. You are part of so many people's lives, which is why endings are always sad. And although I know I am supposed to end on a happy, powerful conclusion, anyone who knows me knows I don't believe this next part. An ending is just a new beginning. Shakespeare said it best, what's past is prologue. Except this is the end, and there will never be anyone as unique as you. So we thank you, we recognize you, and we congratulate you as you go out on top with the Northern California Forensics Association's Distinguished Service Award.
Well, thank you very much. I have certainly been honored to be coaching forensics here for 12 years. I plan on teaching a lot longer, but this is a very special moment. Thank you, Laura, for your eloquence and your kind words. And thank you all for sharing this special evening with me and the speech and debate team. All of your extra credit sheets are out on the front. Sign up by the name. I know that's what you want. Good night, and we love you all.